This article in IEEE Robotics and Automation magazine discusses the use of Gaussians and Riemannian manifolds. I'm Sylvain Calinon from the IDIAP Research Institute in Switzerland. This work started from the observation that in robotics, most techniques for learning, planning and control are described for data in standard vector space, where we can add and scale vectors with standard arithmetic. The goal of this article is to highlight that many of these techniques can go beyond Euclidean spaces by jointly considering Riemannian geometry and statistics. In mathematics, this field of study is sometimes referred to as geometric science of information. A Riemannian manifold is a space that can be curved, but that looks like a standard vector space in the neighborhood of every point. This local property will allow us to extend existing robotics techniques to other types of data. Various forms of manifolds exist, and luckily, it happens that the most simple forms of manifold in Riemannian geometry are also the ones that we need in robotics. And this can be as varied as orientations, matrices, graphs, or subspaces. Most applications in robotics require Gaussian distributions in one way or another. This can be used to represent uncertainty or to sample data points, but it can also be used as part of a learning or control algorithm, whose underlying representation requires Gaussians, such as in a clustering problem with a mixture of Gaussians, a regression problem relying on the correlations between variables, or a control problem based on a precision matrix. Two notions of Riemannian geometry will be crucial here: tangent spaces and parallel transport. If we have a manifold M on a point x0 on this manifold, we can define a tangent space at x0 that will act as standard Euclidean space. We can define in this tangent space a vector showing where we would like to go, that will act as a shooting vector that will make us move on the manifold in the corresponding direction. The resulting path on the manifold is called the geodesic. The mapping functions to move from this tangent space to the manifold, and in the other way around, are called exponential and logarithmic maps, which have an analytical form for all the manifolds I will show in this presentation. The exponential map is the operation that is similar to the addition of a vector to a point, like saying x equals x0 plus v. The logarithmic map is the operation that generalizes the subtraction, like saying v equals x minus x0. I will use this kind of shell here to visualize operations on manifolds in a simple way, but keep in mind that manifolds can be of different shapes and of different dimensions. Maybe the most well-known problem of approximating a manifold with a plane is the problem in cartography of representing our world as a planar map. And we know that this is introducing distortion if we move away from the point around which we have tried to unroll this sphere. So with these mapping functions, we can already solve interpolation problems on manifolds. Here we see the examples on S2, which can be to represent a direction, and the same applies to orientations. Here if we give 2 points, then the interpolation is allowing us to have a natural way to move from one point to the other. This is an example with rigid body motions. If we give 2 poses, then interpolation between these 2 poses can be conducted on the manifold. This is another example with symmetric positive definite matrices, with 2 covariances on the top, and with distribution on the bottom. Indeed, if we embed the mean into the covariance matrices, we can consider interpolation between covariances, and this is the result that we will get for these 2 types of data. So this is relevant for covariance features, but it's also relevant for inertia and gain matrices, for manipulability ellipsoids, and for centroidal momentum ellipsoids. Now here is another example of interpolation of 2x2 symmetric positive definite matrices, or SPD matrices. By considering the symmetry, we can plot the 3 elements of this matrix in a 3D graph. And in this case, the manifold corresponds to the interior of this cone. The tangent space represents the whole space, so it means inside and outside this cone. And similarly as before, we can now define a point on this manifold, so here within the cone, can define a shooting vector. And this shooting vector will create a geodesic, and here each point along this geodesic corresponds to a 2x2 SPD matrix. So it allows us to compute natural interpolations between SPD matrices. Now to move further, the second operation we will need is called parallel transport. This animation here shows the evolution of the tangent space along a geodesic. As you can see, the coordinate system associated to this plane is turning. If we describe a vector in this coordinate system, it means it will also turn. In a standard Euclidean space, we don't have this problem. If I'm defining a vector, this vector will point at the same direction wherever I'm applying it. So to do the same on a Riemannian manifold, we will have to correct this vector by applying a parallel transport operation. It can be defined in an analytical way for all the manifolds I will show here. So if we have a vector u in some tangent space, and if we want to reuse this vector in another tangent space, we need to apply this parallel transport operation. So this is also valid if we want to transport a covariance from one tangent space to another. Now with these tools, we can do some basic statistics, such as computing the average and dispersion of data points. In Euclidean space, we would usually compute a mean and a covariance in an analytical way. This mean is also a centroid. It minimizes a sum of distances corresponding to maximum log likelihood estimates. It's this definition of a mean as a centroid that we will use, which can be easily generalized to a weighted mean by introducing a weighting matrix. And for Riemannian manifolds, the corresponding objective is to minimize this error term. The result is called the Karcher mean or the Frenet mean. And this can be easily computed with an iterative process with a Gauss-Newton algorithm, requiring only a handful of steps to converge. So now this will help us to emulate a Gaussian distribution. So we will first compute a centroid, starting from an initial estimate, and applying iteratively a couple of Gauss-Newton steps in order to find the centroid of this set of data points. So when we are happy with the centroid that Gauss-Newton has found, after convergence we can describe the spread of the data as a covariance in the tangent space of this centroid, represented here as this ellipse. Other more complicated and more formal distributions exist, but this one is simple and fits very well with the needs of robotics applications. We can say that it's not the best, but it's good enough for what we want to do. It provides an estimate of the local spread of the data with negligible errors if the data cover only one part of the manifold. So with these Gaussian, clustering problems can be treated as a mixture of Gaussians, and we can extend standard formulations in Euclidean space to other Riemannian manifolds. Having a tangent space for each Gaussian avoids distortions. Here we see the data visualized from the different tangent spaces. If we would try to solve the same clustering problem with a single tangent space, for example at the north pole of this sphere, at E0 here, the result would not be as good because it would involve larger distortions. So it's important to consider different tangent spaces in the computation and to see which one will introduce the least distortions. So the same principle can be applied to various forms of manifolds, such as clustering orientation data, here with 2 clusters, clustering rigid body motions, here with 3 clusters, or SPD matrix data points, again here with 3 clusters. This can also be extended to regression problems by fitting a joint distribution with a mixture of Gaussian, and then computing a conditional distribution. So if we have input on a sphere and output on a sphere, we first learn the joint distribution, and after, if we have new input data, we can compute for each of these data points a corresponding conditional distribution in the output space. So this is, for example, useful to handle correlations with orientation data. It can also be used to represent the evolution of data on manifolds. For standard Euclidean data, we can set time as input and position as output. We can then extend this principle to other data, such as SPD data points, as we see in this graph. This is allowing to learn and predict the evolution of covariance features or ellipsoids. Noémie Jacquier used a similar principle within the TAC10 project to control prosthetic hands. Here, the idea was to first transform noisy surface EMG signals into a trace of spatial covariances that were computed over a time window, and then using this information to detect a set of hand poses that we want to control. Here in this case, we have as input symmetric positive definite data points of 12 dimensions, and as output we have 4 dimensions in standard Euclidean space. Another problem in which Gaussians are helpful is when we need to fuse different sources of information, which can be represented as a product of Gaussians. It can also be illustrated as the intersections between Gaussians. This can classically be applied to Kalman filtering problems, but it can also be used within control problems, where several controllers need to be combined efficiently by taking into account the uncertainty and the directions that these controllers are caring about. When computing a product of Gaussians, the underlying objective is to minimize the sum of quadratic error terms. The result is analytical in Euclidean space, but the problem can easily be extended to a Gauss-Newton solution, similarly to what we have seen previously. In this work, Emmanuel Pina used the product of Gaussians to adapt a motion to multiple frames of reference. By encoding a movement as a distribution in multiple coordinate systems, the robot can fuse the different sources of information to generate a motion that can adapt to new locations of objects, which can change while the robot moves. This animation shows how such approach can be used with different coordinate systems, here one in orange and one in purple. And this is showing how to generalize this to Riemannian manifolds, with the purple coordinate system, the orange coordinate system, and the fusion of the two, resulting in this distribution in black. This is what we used in the Dexroth project to teleoperate an underwater robot that needed to adapt autonomously to sudden changes of position and orientation of valves, meaning that we had to take into account several coordinate systems to achieve the task in a correct way. Gaussians are also useful in tracking problems, because they allow to describe the precision at which we want to track a target. The typical example is the linear quadratic regulator problem that we can use, for example, to track orientation targets. A more elaborated example here concerns anticipative behaviors, such as in model predictive control, or MPC, where the representation of via points as a set of Gaussians can also be extended to Riemannian manifolds. To conclude, the takeaway message of this article is that robotics is full of manifold structures that could be better exploited. Some are well known, such as orientations or rigid body motions, but others have been underexploited. SPD manifolds, for example, cover a rich range of applications with manipulability, stiffness, inertia, centroidal momentum, but also gains, covariance features in sensing applications, and so on. There is also an opportunity to extend existing algorithms to trees, graphs, and networks if we consider hyperbolic manifolds. Finally, subspaces problems that we face in robotics when we are considering prioritization or null space structures could also benefit from Riemannian geometry, this time by considering Grassmann manifolds. If you are interested in this approach, we have source code available in either MATLAB, C++, or Python that you can see in the first link. If you'd like to know more about our research in the Robot Learning and Interaction group at IDIAP, you can visit my webpage. Don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions or suggestions about this work, and thanks for watching.